Welcome back to part two of Free Speech with CR. And our guests are Dr. George Potamianos, professor of history, and Dr. Peter Blakemore, emeritus professor of literature and environmental ethics. And we were talking about what role higher ed can play in the fight against the slide into authoritarianism and what individuals can do and how important it is for individuals to do something. Um, so take it away.
So what do you think individuals can do? Because I think some people feel that hopeless.
Yeah, I mean, and it's easy to get that way because the government possesses the military, the power of violence. I mean, the government has almost a monopoly on it, you know, and
So far, that's true.
yeah, and so it's easy to get into that.
Well, and I think also our checks and balances feel like they're not holding as well. I think
Correct,
that's a very real fear that people have.
but that's a decision.
Hmm.
Explain that for me.
Well, that's a decision that our Congress, our House of Representatives and Senate have made.
Yeah.
So that's a decision that has been made. That doesn't have to be made.
No.
Right. And so as long as we have our Constitution the way it's written, I mean, like I said before, we see starting in the Second World War, the House of Representatives and the Senate have consistently yielded the power that is given to them in the Constitution over and giving it over to the executive, and that was a willful decision, and it was born out of necessity in a sense, right?
Because of the war.
Because of the war. I mean, during the Second World War, there was a law,
And the Depression.
yeah, in 1942, that where Congress just said, "Look, we're going to give our power of the purse and war. We're going to allow the declaration of war. We're going to vote for it. Then we're going to give authority to the president to conduct the war however he sees fit." And so, FDR created the Pentagon and started the scientific research and development that led to the Manhattan Project and the bombs. And under Truman, I mean, that we have not had a declared war since. So Congress has basically said, we don't. We're just surrendering that authority that we have in the Constitution, and we're going to allow the president to make these military decisions.
And then individuals, you asked about individuals. Individuals need to see themselves as agents
Yes.
within a society. Um, uh, there are plenty of historical past periods and historical in the history where we can see where individuals did not see themselves as agents within a society. In the old feudal system, you didn't really own the land that you worked. You weren't really a slave. You were a vassal of a sort, but you were owned by the land because that was the only place you could live. And so the baron, or whomever, the prince or whomever, basically owned the land that you worked. And I mean, we had something very similar to this with sharecropping
Sharecroppers.
in the
Same way.
yes. So I mean, getting individuals seeing themselves as agents, which is I think one of the great things about teaching early American literature, which I used to teach a lot. You see the rise of individual agents, like Benjamin Franklin's one of my favorite things to teach because he saw himself as moving against social currents. Talk about Frederick Douglass, a great American. I mean, I often would tell my students these are the two greatest autobiographies in America are going to be Benjamin Franklin and Frederick Douglass. These are people who saw themselves having agency. And when people don't see that, when they see themselves as not having any kind of ability to make change in the world, to speak to one another out on the street, I mean, that kind of dampening that you see, which is something that we, I think, saw in Los Angeles when we started to see the movement of troops when people were starting to do basically fairly. I mean, I know that there was some violence in the streets and some fire bombing of cars and things like that. That's gonna happen sometimes. But if protests are largely nonviolent, then there's really no reason to stop them. And you and I will remember those from the '60s, the very large protest movement. So that means individuals saw themselves as part of, as having agency, as part of the pressure to bring to bear on the systems of government that were making decisions about, like, fighting wars, about whether Black Americans would have the vote, whether women would, have better economic value in marketplaces, all those things. So, I mean, I think individuals need to see themselves as having agency. And I mentioned this in the earlier one. I'm a little bit concerned that Americans right now are letting their agency vanish into the ether through social media and other places where
Yeah, and
shouting at
yeah, it's like this craving of like somebody just lead us,
yeah.
and you could see that. I mean, you could see it with like all these superhero movies that
Oh,
were just,
right.
you know what I mean? But that's really about it's just about this desire for somebody.
To save you.
Yeah, exactly. And they're all, they're the flawed superheroes, right? And so that's, it's so parallel to this what we have, right now in the White House.
And so we've had people tap into that desire to be led.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
I think so.
For sure.
And you could see it in the 90s. I mean, I really do think that uh we talk about like how much conspiracy thinking has led us in this moment, and then we go to QAnon. But really, I mean, this stuff, I mean, this has been part of American politics for forever.
Yeah.
I mean,
Demagogue.
Hofstadter wrote The Paranoid Style of American Politics in the 1950s.
Yeah.
So, but we did see, like in the 90s, there was this huge upswing in conspiratorial TV.
Yeah.
Right? X-Files was like the biggest show.
Mhm. Right.
And so that thinking is proliferates when people don't feel like they feel like the forces around them are too strong and they can't make sense of it and they don't feel powerful.
And there's the appearance of research and
Yeah, right.
and truth
Right.
in internet. And now when we have deep fakes and the rest of this, it's like, well, what's true and what's not. And so we get a lot of that. I mean,
Right.
I just retired and I taught for and worked in higher ed for about more than 40 years. And this is something that I really noticed when George was talking about in the 90s, when students started telling me they didn't read newspapers at all. They didn't trust them. They were skeptical about everything. And I saw a much greater rise in this conspiracy mind, the mind that says, somebody's doing something that's changing the world in ways that I want to find out. And then the internet, I think, really in the late 90s and early 2000s, really kind of that exploded. So learning how to think critically and to analyze information that you receive and to find out where it comes from and to do the tracing back through where it came from, and then doing the interpretation. These are things that take time. They take effort. The algorithm's not going to do it for you.
Hearing that from this conversation and what I've read is that people's trust in institutions is at an all-time low, which goes along with this idea of conspiracies and you can't trust anyone, you can't trust the media, you can't trust higher ed to give you the things that everybody's said.
And that's not just in the United States either. That's going on all around all around the world now. Tom Jute's great book. Yeah. Europe, the 20th century.
How do we combat that?
Well, higher ed is a place that teaches people how to do real research
Mhm.
and how to understand what they're looking
But
at.
if you don't trust the institutions,
Yeah.
I mean, that's about that. Now you're getting into the biggest problem here, which is honestly about kind of communal thought and whether people see themselves as connected to others within, not just the individual. I mean, I've often talked to my students about it. I said, what's the ideology that drives America in the United States? It's individualism for sure. There's no doubt. All you have to do is read the Constitution, read the Declaration of Independence, read Thomas Jefferson's Notes on the State of Virginia, read early American lit. It's individualism. And this is why so many people flock to the United States, to the colony, the early colonies, is because yeah, and it gave them the opportunity. If you read the Captain John Smith, the fake Pocahontas story. His main reason for coming he was trying to sell people on the colonies, on North America, and it was because you could hunt whenever you wanted, you could fish whenever you wanted. It wasn't owned by a lord. So individualism is highly a super important aspect of American culture and ideology, but communalism is also super important.
Yep.
So if you look at these towns on the prairie in Nebraska in the 1870s, you read a great novel like Willa Cather's My Antonia, where she shows how these people came together and they would perish if they did not come together. So, that whole concept of individual plus communal and that balance.
It's like,
And right now we've kind of lost.
Well, and when you lose faith in the institutions, then you find the tribes, right? So that's this kind of lintering into the tribalism
Right.
more than the
Yeah.
community.
Yeah. That's the us versus them
right.
paradigm, that there's somebody to hate as opposed to there's a reason to kind of work together to get somewhere,
Right.
which, eyes on the prize, as the famous uh, comment from the civil rights was always like, keep your eyes on the
Sure.
prize. So, I, I mean, I would be interested to know what George thought about this, about
Mhm.
whether he sees uh, a rise in literacy, a decline in literacy. I mean, he and I both actually
Yeah.
worked on the Humboldt Literacy Project.
Yeah.
For many years, we were board members. So, we kind of recognize how important being literate is, and
Yeah.
being able to read. History is really about, it's not archaeology. So you are looking at material culture, but you're really looking at documents, really. You need to see what people said, what they believed, what they thought,
Yeah.
how they interacted.
I mean, history is about using human writing as
Yeah.
the basis.
Yeah.
Prehistoric just means prior to writing.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Right. Um, I don't know. I mean, I only know anecdotally, and so I know that like the people I know who teach English literature are telling me that students don't read books anymore, and I mean, I'm in a different environment, because in the prison, the
Yeah.
guys,
You're
the
teaching,
guys,
at Pelican Bay State Penitentiary.
yeah,
A college of the Redwoods courses at Pelican Bay.
right, and the guys there are reading. I mean, so, but I understand from my colleagues that's becoming harder and harder, and so it's going to have to shift. I mean, I think there's going to have to be a lot more reading in class,
Mhm.
right? I mean, and it's tough. I mean,
Reading in class versus homework.
Yeah. Yeah, telling people, yeah, you have half an hour to read this essay,
yeah, and then write about it.
because they won't read it
If
if you don't.
one won't read outside of class.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it could be important. I mean, I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing. It could be the way that things need to move. There was that interesting piece about AI, and I've been reading some stuff about a lot of institutions now have gone back to like blue book tests.
Yep.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And doing things in class. Let's read this and take it apart. I mean, I do a lot of that in my teaching as well, and we used to do it all the time.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, okay, we're gonna take a look at this piece now. And
Or you're going to present ideas in the classroom to the rest of your colleagues.
yeah, and it's very valuable that way.
Mhm.
So higher ed is good for that too. It's also good for promoting a sense of community. This is why I think the for me, the one of the I mean, the pandemic obviously didn't it just exacerbated all this, with the isolation. But also, like, I think this I don't read the history of higher ed. There's a lot of great scholars who do this work, but it seems like the turn to DE and thinking that that was going to be the thing that just I think that just ends up creating an atomized classroom. And now this move toward, the student X has, from 3 to 4 on Tuesdays when they can do this work, and then student Y is like, but we want them all in the same class, but they're not really in the same class. And so basically now you're just furthering the atomization. You're not really creating a class or experience that students are going to have together. And there's so much more that happens in a classroom
Yeah.
between students than just learning English or learning math. There's a lot of interaction that goes on between them.
And that's
That's the model.
for the communal
Yeah.
setting. I mean, I taught environmental ethics here for, I don't know, 15 years or something. And I mean, obviously, you can't think of I used to tell them beginning of the semester, you couldn't think of a better place to teach that than right here, where you have timber families, fishing families, uh, hippies, everybody's here, the environmental activists
In the room.
in the room.
Yeah.
And we would be able to, and I know you visited my class more than once. We would have these large discussions. 40 students would be talking to one another about what's going on. Now that's about agency.
Yeah.
And it's about real learning, where I would always tell them, I've learned as much as you have in this semester because of all the ideas that you brought into the room. use
Getting out of the silos that you find when
get
you have
exactly right and finding out what other people actually think.
Yep.
So
You know, I've been thinking about this MAGA movement,
Hmm.
and I've been trying to understand it for the last 8 months. Something that you both just said crystallized why it's so prevalent in America. It's because of change. People fought change.
Oh yeah.
They want to go back. And what you just said is some parts of higher ed doesn't want to change as well. And they want to go back to the old ways. So I'm wondering,
There's definitely like
that,
a sense of
that's
nostalgia.
interesting.
Yeah. There's definitely a sense of nostalgia with it. But it's probably for a
big
back
time.
that doesn't exist, only exists in
Right.
people's
So,
minds.
so are you saying that what you're now espousing doesn't really exist in it?
It's not a nostalgia what we're talking about. I mean, what I would say, here's how I think that's a great, I think your question is an
Yeah.
excellent question because you just made me stop and think, okay, maybe I have been being nostalgic. But what I really think about is that now there's this narrative of the inevitability of artificial intelligence and that it's going to be used. It has to be used in our classrooms and we have to use it. And, there's there's just a little bit of that I agree with, which is like it's not going to go away. But do we want to put curbs on it? Do we want to figure out how it can be best used? And what am concerned about, especially with artificial intelligence right now, is that this inevitability of it, this claim that this is just going to roll right through. So figure out how to get on board. That we're never going to examine how it doesn't work. And I can tell you a bunch of ways. I mean, I wasn't teaching for the last few years. I was a dean here, but I talked to the faculty all the time about how AI had been influencing what they were able to do in the class. And usually it wasn't doing it in a good way. So I only found that the people who really could work with it were the ones who tried to get ahead of it and figure out how to manage it in such a way that it wasn't affecting the things they wanted from their students. So think about that. Right now, it seems like the super powerful multi-billionaires are running the show.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are going to make the decisions about what is going to happen in all of our lives.
Yeah.
That doesn't talk about agency. Then Americans feel like, and that's the same thing that people
That's
who lost their manufacturing job in Michigan or
Right.
Ohio, in their steel mills, in Pennsylvania in the 1990s, in the 80s and 90s.
80s and 90s.
That's what they felt, the loss of agency.
Deindustrialization.
The deindustrialization. Yep.
And when
So-
you use that inevitability idea, it makes people feel like it's a foregone
Yeah.
conclusion, and so there's no reason to do
Yeah.
anything.
Why should I?
Free.
Yeah.
There's nothing to be done.
There's no and that's exactly what they want. They don't want regulation. They want free reign over what happens with AI in the
Yeah.
future.
George said something in the first segment, and something that I used to always say. Well, we used to say it in our class because we team taught. I think we said in the first for at least a dozen years. We were in the classroom together for like 12 years with the students, and what we would tell them is, and I'd say it to my own classes, why do we call it the liberal arts? And the reason why we call what we're doing in history and literature in these fields of study, critical thinking, philosophy, why do we call it the liberal arts? Because it's supposed to liberate us. It means what the concept is that you would know enough that you wouldn't need to have somebody else do things for you. You could make the choice about what was the right way for you to manage your life. You could make the choice about where you wanted to live. You could make the choice about which crops you wanted to plant. You could make the choice about, whether to grant women the right to vote. I mean, that were liberated in that way. And this has been the kind of moving emphasis behind all the freedom movements in America. And, libertarians these days have gone a little far to I don't know which direction to put them in, but that's kind of was the motivating force behind a lot of the concepts of libertarianism.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's really odd today to see libertarians accept the
Authoritarian.
Yes, that is basically creating limits to their freedom.
Yeah.
That's very bizarre to me.
Yeah.
well, is there such thing as too much freedom?
Yeah. Another good talk to Hob. Great question. Another great question. Yeah. Nature is nasty, brutish, and short.
Is it really? Is there a limit to it that we should have freedom, and freedom to do what? Are there limits to what?
Freedom to murder each other.
But it still happens.
It
Yeah.
does. Yeah. But we're not free to.
It's not.
I mean,
It's
you can
not.
be.
Yeah.
Well,
You can have your freedom removed for doing it.
that's not totally true. I could see that. However, in the run up to this election,
Mhm.
now what was espoused is this person can kill someone on the street and still be elected president, and that was accepted.
I mean,
Except
he's got a point.
so I really am curious.
Yeah.
Is there a limit to what we accept as free?
Well, the limits are the extent of your arm to somebody else's face and their ability to have the freedom to do what they want. And that's I mean, this is an interesting philosophical point. I mean, anarchists would
Right.
claim that you shouldn't have any controls placed upon you because if you're a good person, you will not harm another person.
Right.
But what we know from social organization over the last, especially the last 500 or 600 years, is that it doesn't usually work out that way.
No.
Somebody wants more than the other person, and there's some bad actors who aren't going to honor the other person's right to not be molested or harmed. And they're I mean, we may be seeing plenty of that right now. People who don't have empathy, they don't really feel that another person's pain or suffering is something that affects them in any way. If they can get what they need for their family, for their tribe.
Not mass deportations.
Yep, mass deportations.
Which is accepted in this country.
Yeah, well, that's another huge.
And it
Right.
has been before too. This is not
No, it happened under Eisenhower. Obama deported 400,000 people.
did.
So, I mean, that was pretty mass.
During the beginning of the war on terror, we had those black sites where we were banning
Yeah.
people, and so I mean, yeah, habeas corpus, stopping habeas corpus is a very serious. I mean, it's what Lincoln did it during the Civil War. I think did FDR do it at all? No, he never did have to.
Well, he did Saturn was the Japanese
internment.
internment.
That certainly is. That was
These are all they're all presumed
laws of habeas.
to be spot.
And habeas corpus just means you have to present the body. Basically,
Yeah.
you have to be brought in front of a magistrate and told what the charges are.
Why are you being held? Right.
Yeah, and if you're not told why you're being held, how long can you be held? Well, that's the
Long
but
time.
forever, apparently. You can be disappeared. And if we start living in a society where people are okay with others being disappeared, then we are really in trouble.
Well, this comes back to the checks and balances of the rules and norms that seem to have been thrown out the window under this administration. It's leading to this idea that some people are free to do whatever they want and others aren't. So
The thing to really watch for, I think, right now is I'm not seeing very much of it. I'm seeing it from lower federal courts, but I'm not seeing it from the Supreme Court, but whether they ever make the challenge of you must stop. Because what they've been doing mostly is holding up a green light.
To the more powerful executive.
Keep going.
That's true.
Keep going. Keep going. And
Yeah.
I mean, this was what happened to Nixon, by the way. George mentioned him, is that all of the Supreme Court found that he would have to release the tapes,
Yes.
the Nixon tapes. And as soon as those came out, we had Republican senators coming to his office telling him, you got to resign.
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't happen today.
No.
Well,
No shame.
that was the court that that required that he release the tapes. And even though his secretary had probably told her to erase a bunch of they erased a bunch of it, but still, it was damning. He was definitely doing things that were violation of the law, constitutional violations, and that's when Nixon said, "When the president does it, it's not illegal."
Right.
And this president has what? 40 felonies?
I thought it was only 34.
Right. I don't know.
That's more than 30. Okay.
It's more than I have.
Yes, more than I have.
Now here's the other thing that I've struggled with is the fact that in the classroom we say that higher ed is the answer, but we also have seen where if there are students or parents or most students in the classroom that don't really like what a professor's saying, then they can inform on them, right? And so what then can we do?
This is
Because of course, so we
had that.
we are back to
McCarthy.
in America grading.
Right. Yeah. It just
It's that same period of time.
right. It just reminds me of On the Waterfront,
On
which
what-
was
yeah.
which was the idea that ratting's okay. So it's like, hey, good,
If you're fighting communism, then it's okay.
or if you're fighting the mob union,
Yeah, the mob union.
basically
And so
stand up
what
for that.
what would you say to your faculty colleagues when fear is pervasive in the classroom? What do you tell them? Because I'll tell you what I have said to them, but I'm curious to see what.
Well, I would hope that, I mean, I don't worry about that in the case of CR, but because I know it well. I mean, I've been here 25 years, right? But I would hope that at any institution, that really where this falls down is if the administration doesn't have the backs of the faculty.
Hmm.
And it falls down in a number of ways. I mean, if we can look at what happened at Evergreen in the early or to mid 2000s,
Yeah.
and the administration there did not have the backs of certain faculty members.
I remember it very clearly.
Right. And so
because actually I was close to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
and so here, it's like, okay, if we're going to teach the honesty about slavery, I'm not going to teach it as a job improvement system or anything, some stupid.
Which we've heard.
I
Oh, no, that's
we've heard.
fine.
And then somebody, and we're reading, Echiano, we're reading these slave narratives, or we're reading the perspective of slave owners, and we're reading that in the classroom, and we're using that to sort of talk about, like, what was this? What were these systems like? And then a student says, well, they're not teaching that this was a positive thing, and they go rat up the chain. I would hope that my administration would be like, okay, look, this you don't have a basis for a complaint here.
Yeah.
You know,
I think you're seeing, I feel like, I was an administrator here and and so was he.
You were.
Well, we were both 5 years, and we recognized the need for academic freedom and for the ability of an instructor to speak what they saw as the truth or what they could verify through documentary, through insight into documents. And so, and I always have felt like you had my back and people above me had understood that we have to maintain this if we're going to have free interchange of ideas and build that communal sense of agency. And so, but let's be honest, there are lots of institutions right now that are caving. And I think what George said, and you, I think, know this, Keith, it really has been the administrators who haven't backed up faculty who want to maintain. And it's not, and this way, it's both directions, right and left. You have to give people the freedom to investigate ideas. Yes.
Which George, you said is what's important is that we don't cave like other schools have caved, and we had been on record to say we will not do so. So
Yeah.
And we'll be having another conversation
really important
about academic freedom
freedom of freedom of speech.
semester.
Anyway,
So,
thank you very, very much for being our first guest of our CR free speech at CR podcast.
I hope we kicked it off. I hope we seem to speak freely. Right.
You did, and there's lots of more questions that we have answers for, but you have stimulated our minds and our future questions.